Today, I am pleased to welcome Dr. Bia Labate as our guest. Dr. Labate is an anthropologist based in San Francisco. She has a Ph.D. in social anthropology from the University of Campinas, Brazil. Her main areas of interest are the study of plant medicines, drug policy, shamanism, ritual, religion, and social justice. She is executive director of the Chacruna Institute for Psychedelic Plant Medicines and serves as public education and cultural specialist at the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. She is also visiting scholar at the Graduate Theological Union at Berkeley and an advisor for the Veteran Mental Health Leadership Coalition. She is an author, co-author, and co-editor of 28 books, 3 special edition journals, and several peer-reviewed articles. And with that, Bia, we welcome you.
Hi, Burton. Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
And thank you. Let's dive straight in with the first question. I'm wondering if you could please share the inspiration behind your extensive exploration of psychedelic plant medicines and how it led you to your pursuit of a PhD in anthropology.
Okay. I was already studying to be an anthropologist. I was studying social sciences in Brazil, which includes anthropology, sociology, and political science. When I did a trip backpacking in Mexico when I was 19, I stayed traveling 1.5 year. Originally was supposed to stay 1 month, but was really touched by Mexico and Guatemala and ended up going all the way to Alaska. And in this trip, I had the chance to eat mushrooms and peyote and LSD, and it was really very influential. Of course, backpacking and going to small villages and getting lost in the deserts and jungles of Mexico was also very magical and inspirational. I was already a student in university that delayed my career because I took all this time off. But it was something that was really life changing and brought me another perspective of understanding myself, the universe, the invisible world, the world beyond, the world of ancestors, and just a deep care and love and fascination for indigenous traditions and all the wisdom, the beauty, the music, the relationship to the land, to traditions, to kinship, and all those topics that anthropologists like. And so I was already studying, and what happened was that later on, a few years later, I got to reconnect with psychedelics by trying ayahuasca when I was at that time 26. And that opened a whole other dimension of things for me again.
Wow, that's truly fascinating. And I'm eager to learn more about some of those therapeutics that you mentioned. Um, Specifically, I think your area of expertise lends well to cultural awareness. And the Chacruna Institute emphasizes the importance of cultural awareness when studying psychedelic plant medicines. How do you think that researchers and psychedelic enthusiasts can respectfully engage with and learn from indigenous cultures?
Well, I think that's kind of the $1 million question that everybody wants to know. I think the answer that people normally don't want to hear is leave those medicines alone and don't touch them. So I think, we should not make big generalizations. Anthropologists are very much related to local communities and to study of particular expressions. Different plants are related to different traditions and to different ethnicities and to different territories. Also, even just one plant can be related to different traditions. And the great example is ayahuasca, that is consumed throughout the Amazon by dozens of different indigenous groups. So there's not an universal answer on, what is the best way to relate to all of these substances and to all of these traditions. There are particular answers for particular cases. For example, in the case of the United States, the indigenous movement here has um, asked the psychedelic folks from part of the so-called psychedelic renaissance to stay out of the decriminalization of peyote, that they wanted to be leading this decriminalization or this regulation efforts directly with the federal government themselves, and they have urged people to leave them to be leaders of this relationship, which is also a relationship based on uh, trust with native, special trust relationships with the government and special rights that Native Americans have in the United States. The case of mushrooms in Mexico is different. Mushrooms are spread throughout the United States and other countries. We haven't had this expansion of Mazatec shamanism in similar ways. And then the use of ayahuasca also has a lot of particularities. For example, in the Brazilian Amazon, uh, native indigenous people have asked the help of the psychedelic movement and other allies to help create opportunities and collaborations that are meaningful. So there's different contexts. I think the main point to make is that you have to be in relationship with indigenous people, and it's not just about you and your wishes and you and your views, but how are you using your power and your privilege to support the people that are in the ground doing this work since before many generations of us were born. And so, do you have relationship to any native communities? Do you have native friends? Do you have people that taught you? And a lot of people are self-proclaimed, for example, hape experts, and they went to the Amazon once, and they think that they learned how to apply hape, and that they're claiming to be experts on that. Uh, they don't even know how to pronounce hape or to spell hape. And so there's all kinds of things that need to be said. It's a kind of very um, wide question, but I think the more the whole perspective is to think that we are guests and in these medicines, and to be in relationship and to have the agreement of those that you are in relationship, and to relate to specific people and specific traditions. So somebody will ask me, what do you think of me applying hape? And I'm like, who taught you? And what does that person think of you doing that? And same thing, there's a lot of people that are self-proclaimed ayahuasca shamans. Somebody goes to the Amazon, meets some indigenous people, and decides to take a photo wearing the headdressers or being painted, and said they had the blessings of the shaman. And there's deep, like, cultural translation issues that often get lost. And I think it's really about approaching things with humbleness, listening a lot, believing in creating trust relationships that are spread through time, having the power of learning other languages, having the power of being in silence, having the power of accepting that sometimes you're not should be a part of something, understanding that sometimes the best thing to do is not to participate, creating relationships and trying to see how that serves the locals. Because one thing is your need, the other thing is what the people on the ground need. So maybe you need a nice object for your living room, and that's your really top priority is to get that object. But that's not like necessarily the thing that that person in the Amazon or somewhere needs. So you should ask people what they need and see how you can um, add and avoid this white savior complex, which is this idea that you have the solutions and you know the answers and that you're going to bring to them, who what reenact a lot of colonization tropes, this idea that there are primitive people that you have to teach and to uh, save, and that you and your knowledge and your science and your methods are more developed and you're there to offer that to them, but rather support their own efforts, support grassroots organizations, support the right to self-determination, support the right to sovereignty, support autonomy, empower people to conduct the projects they need on their own terms, on their own timing, with their own methods. And again, not trying to reinvent the wheel, coming top down with, um, magical solutions, or saying, I'm going to do a philanthropic project and I'm also going to be filming people on how they cook the medicine. Well, is that philanthropy? You're like buying people's image with another language. Be very mindful of power hierarchies and how it is hard for those with less resources that have been systematically suffering a genocide from the state and systemic racism and systemic inequalities of capitalism, and don't have all the resources that you have. And when you are in relationship with these folks, there are power issues that you have to be mindful of, and there's hierarchies and there's inequalities, and you have to be going out of your way and have extra care to unlearn all the things that you have been taught by the status quo and the mainstream, because we live in extremely hierarchical and unequal and unfair uh, relationships that have a lot of history of colonization. And when we are enacting this in our plant medicine journeys, we some if we don't do an extra effort to go against this state of the art, we're going to reproduce a lot of racism and a lot of abuse, and just in general have a lot of lack of sensitivity. So it's really important to think on how you're benefiting locals. Even the question of representation, people are very concerned of having representatives of like indigenous people in your conference, but is that important to them? How is that going to help them? That's also, you have to be in this dialogue, building things in collaboration horizontally like equals, is much harder and much more complicated and takes a lot more of time. And so it's not easy. It's also can be costly financially, to build things with this slow pace and in relationship, in partnership. And there's a lot of learning that needs to be done. Anyway, sorry, I tend to talk a lot, and I think I I went on and on.
I appreciate it. I think that was a really comprehensive response and had a ton of really high quality content there. So you can feel free to talk as long as you feel called to. Something that I was thinking about as I was listening is this really stark contrast between what you are delineating in terms of a cultural context and medicine that has been administered for thousands, potentially tens of thousands of years, compared to the Renaissance and clinical trials that are being done at institutions of higher learning and university centers, which is very, very different. And we know that psychedelics and the experience are affected by set and physical setting. And so I wonder how we can honor the lessons learned through traditional indigenous knowledge. And let me ask you, in your view, how can Western society best integrate traditional indigenous knowledge and practices to better contribute to a holistic understanding of psychedelics and their potential therapeutic benefits?
Again, a huge question. There's a lot of people asking these questions, and are questions that don't have an easy answer. I think I want to add to my previous questions still, that I think one really important thing is to be aware of the struggles that indigenous people face, their political issues, and support these political struggles, such as uh, things like land demarcation and access to water and to natural resources, and all kinds of things that are happening, especially in Latin America, um, in terms of rights being taken away and systemic attempts by the government to dismantle historically, important milestones. Also, I want to tell everybody that Indigenous people have been publishing declarations about topics that they feel are important and that we should be paying attention to what they say, read and be aware of the comments. I want to say that we have been publishing a lot of this things in Chacruna, so I encourage everybody to go forward and to uh, check those resources out. So, in terms of your question on how to better incorporate indigenous knowledge into psychedelic science, this is also a topic that I would say is kind of central to the mission of the Chacruna Institute. And we have also published a few resources and have a lot of angles on how to address this. I think we need to start by recognizing that there is a continuity between shamanism, the underground, and traditional use of sacred plants by indigenous people that has really influenced. It's not the only source, but certainly influenced the underground of urban contemporary therapeutic circles. A lot of concepts have migrated, and these circles have also influenced the above ground psychedelic assisted therapy universe. So there is this kind of continuity and elements that overlap and intersect between what happens with shamanism and the current ways that we conduct psychedelic therapies and psychedelic trials and psychedelic science research is based and heir in a lot of ways to indigenous elements. So I think it would start by acknowledging this history, which frequently get lost. You have a kind of mainstream narrative that the the research started in the 60s, and then there was some exaggerations, and then there was a backlash, and then this was forbidden, and then now finally we're opening up the doors again, and research is happening again, and we're able to understand better and learn again. That's a narrative that is very limited and kind of erase historically the origin of the field as a whole, which is heir to indigenous people. And so this invisibilization of indigenous knowledge and practices is part of the mainstreaming and the of psychedelics and the biomedical reductionism that exists around it. So this is also something important that needs to be acknowledged. Again, I think it would be a lot about creating co-authorships and collaborations with indigenous people. We just published an article in the Natural Medicine, Nature Medicine Journal, which is a collaboration between Adana Omagua Cambeba, Siddhartha Ribeiro, and myself, trying to create a dialogue between shamanism and psychedelic science. And what would it mean to really honor indigenous plants and traditions uh, for both researchers and clinicians to take into account this origins of the psychedelic movement. So there's a lot of again things that could be said. I think one important point is to take seriously this idea that indigenous people have championed, that these plants are in fact spirits, that they have agency, that they have a kind of subjectivity, they have a kind of intentionality, they have a kind of personality, and you have to be able to relate to these entities. And they are, if you follow certain diets and certain rules, you can then uh, participate and learn from them and be in communion with them. And if you follow this discipline, there is you can incorporate some of that wisdom and be in a relationship, in a dialogue with these plants. This is a principle that is very influential, that has to do with different perspectives on nature and culture. It's and what is animated and not. That's a long discussion. I'm not going to be going into all of this, but it's something to consider. Another point is to have a wider perspective on the notion of healing. Healing not just as healing one specific disease and one specific molecule of one specific substance healing one specific disease, but a more comprehensive notion of healing, a more holistic notion of healing, that is a relationship that involves um, a relationship to a certain substance. That dimension certainly is important, but it's not just that. It involves a relationship to other humans and also to the world beyond, to the world of non-humans, to the invisible world, to the cosmos. uh, so it's frequently in across the Americans, from an Amerindian perspective, disease is an imbalance on these different levels and these different relationships. And healing would involve a rearranging of these relationships, of these connections. And of course, it also involves a connection to Mother Earth, to the planet. There's different ways to name this, but this larger um, whole that we are all a part of. So it's less about just wanting your personal healing and your individual healing and talking about your own traumas and your childhood and your own dilemmas, but also trying to engage in this larger set of relationships, talking about plants as a whole, not plants as molecules only or as pills, but plants with agency. And also, it's not just about imitating, appropriating, reducing indigenous knowledge to a series of techniques uh, uh, that you can mimic, so to speak. For example, I know a lot about ayahuasca compared to others plants, but I also researched other plants. But it's something frequent that shamans will say, just singing is not healing. There's a certain way to heal through singing, that it's just not being a cantador, somebody that sings. And in Chacruna, we also have all this work related to talking about relationship to the land and to the importance of knowing the cultures that you are visiting, their names, the people that inhabited, what are the traditional names by which they were called, where do you know that if you're going to an ayahuasca retreat in Iquitos, the Shipibo shaman are not from that area. For example, uh, building that relationship to the land and to the people is something that we should also be very mindful of. I also want to mention the topic of talking between the differences between indigenous people and psychedelic therapy, that it's really important that the therapists drink the substances as well from the perspective of native groups. Even in some contexts, only the shaman will drink and not the patient. So, if you believe that these plants are agents and spirits and they have knowledge, uh, uh, then you should be able to experience that on your own body. And so, cultivating a personal practice and cultivating self knowledge and cultivating uh, an exercise of being humble, which can often happen with these plants, is very important for a psychedelic therapist. I would say that is a teaching that indigenous people have for psychedelic therapists. I think the also another thing that comes to mind is the importance of group therapy and group sessions. That's also very a wisdom that you can bring from communal plant-based rituals. I think another element that comes to mind a lot is the idea is the role of humor and the importance to keep humor, and humor can be a way of healing and of creating relationships. After all, you only make fun of the things that you care about and the things that you are in relationship with. And so I think having also being in a way less serious and self-important and more open to fun, learning through tales, learning through stories, learning through personal experiences, learning through mistakes. All of that are things that I feel are, things we can learn from Indigenous people and incorporate more this spirit of ceremony and sacred into our practices, uh, developing processes that take years to learn. Um, so an indigenous shaman, pajé, will maybe take 5, 10, 20 years. It's not doing a 1 year course or a 6 months course. Um, anyway, those are some ideas that come to mind.
I love it. I'm eating all this information up like candy, so keep it coming. Switching gears a bit, we see more than a dozen states in the United States currently considering ballot measures and initiatives to allow a pathway for decriminalization of certain psychedelic therapeutics. Given your perspective and expertise, how do you perceive the evolving legislative landscape of drug policy concerning psychedelic substances? You mentioned peyote, potentially some constraints or restrictions. But what role do you believe anthropological perspectives play in shaping these policies?
Well, one is what happens, and the other is what I would like to see happening. Not to, toot my own horn as an anthropologist, but I do think that anthropology and social sciences and the humanities in general should play a much larger role in the discussions of drug policy. The whole system that is the dominating uh, framework for drug policy is very based on a biomedical reductionism. So it's this idea that you have a certain substance that has a certain molecule that is good or bad, and then you're going to classify this by schedules. So the different schedules of access, schedule 1, 2, 3, and then allegedly certain substances have certain effects. It's a kind of reductionistic understanding that drugs are taken in certain contexts by certain people, and that involve again a key word: relationships, mediations, nuance that gets lost in this big biomedical or judicial systems. So, in one word, whereas everybody recognized that drugs are drug set and setting, meaning the properties of the substance, the individual and its subjectivity, and the setting is the larger context, is the social larger framework. Everybody recognizes that that triad is what organizes the experience. However, in practical terms, the variable, the drug, and the setting, the individual, they have much more predominance in the understanding that we as societies do of these experiences, because we're always focusing on how these substances have certain properties that can be toxic or addictive or dangerous. And also we're talking a lot about how certain individuals and certain histories are influential, and how that's going to be affecting that certain individual. What we talk much less about, and what I modestly and secretly think that is super 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 important, is the larger context. It's the situation. So it's really common sense. It's entirely different to take a substance if you are walking in the street, or if you are in silence in dark, for example. So the set is really important. And the set is not just like pretend you're watching a movie. The set is like people creating a choreography, a nice sofa, a nice perfume, a nice picture on the wall, a nice, little cute decoration. The set is something much larger that involves the culture that exists around the substances, is your beliefs around what they are. They inform your experience, because we are not tabula rasa. We are walking cultural beings that are influenced by the things that we were told, the language that we speak, the country we were born, the people we relate, the people we date, all of it. So our cultural understandings of what the substances are is fundamental for the experiences we are having. So, very dumb example, if you're taking something that is you're learned that is dangerous and evil, and either it's criminalized, it's pathologized, it's demonized, and you're going to take that in secretly in a motel with a friend, you're going to have a certain kind of experience that is different than if you learned that these are legitimate tools that might help your well-being, or might enhance your spirituality, or might be supportive for your personal growth, or that are part of certain cultural traditions. For example, take the example of wine and enology, and how people learn how to cultivate the grapes, the soil, the taste, the flavor, the land, this and that. So the context is everything. So, coming back to drug policy, we have to talk to anthropologists and to users of substances to talk about the proper context, to talk about the proper ways to use these substances. This is absolutely fundamental, and this is not done often. Often, these policies are decided top down by some bureaucrat in some kind of government secret meeting that not everybody has access, or that is hard, to understand, or is bureaucratic or full of rules, but it's not like a deep dialogue with those that have been on the ground for dozens of years, sometimes centuries or thousands of years, doing these practices. They have to be heard, they have to have a seat on the table. That knowledge is important, because the law is going to be a series of plain, generic, top down rules that are meant to be universal for everybody everywhere, with a certain standard, has to follow those rules. When we know that different communities have different traditions, different contexts have different values, and building knowledge from within is much more powerful and much more successful. Because if you learn and if you incorporate, if you truly interiorize those values and those views, then you don't need anybody to tell you what to do, because you already know what is the right way to do things. And this is very much the case of these cultures, which you have certain standards that is the etiquette, the protocol, the values, the norms, the social and cultural informal controls, the tales, the stories, the conversations that inform good behavior, what is best practice. So, those kinds of cultural knowledge, cultural controls, they are fundamental for the well use of substances. And all contexts have them, and they are beautiful, and they are dynamic, and they are always evolving, and they are always improving, they're always in dialogue. So I envision uh, the spread of these decriminalization initiatives with a wide holistic working group, consultation, collective process, where the knowledge of the people in the ground, the people that are using the substances, is incorporated, is heard, is valued, together with scientific research, together with consultation to different minorities, and to with some leadership of social sciences. And that is the work also we try to do in Chacruna towards the harm reduction of the globalization of the substances, creating a bunch of resources that would help inform better ways for this expansion to happen.
Well said. Thank you for that. I do want to pick your brain a bit and get your thoughts on a debate that's occurring right now as the space evolves, as researchers look at small molecules, and some labs that are even considering removing the trip of psychedelics. And clearly, this is very, very starkly contrasted with whole plant medicine, and I have an idea of where you stand, but I would love to get you captured on the record of really helping listeners understand that companies like what companies like Compass Pathways and MindMed and what they're doing with small molecules, how that could potentially be stripping the full benefit of the plant itself. You've spoken about ayahuasca. Please share your thoughts.
Well, I think there's two things in what you said. One is just trying to reduce certain fungi or plants, including their cacti, of course, to certain molecules. That's one discussion. Another discussion is trying to take away the psychedelic effect altogether. So those are two different discussions. Again, I think I want to avoid generalizations. I do think that we live in a plural world, that there is space for a lot of different things, and there's also a lot of different needs. Some people might feel more comfortable in the environment of a hospital, and they don't want to go to a ceremony in the dark some place, or they don't want to go to the woods with their friends. So I think we should avoid saying there's only one path and one model that fits everybody, because we really live in complex, multicultural, and dynamic societies, and there's a lot of space. I would say that in terms of my personal interests and my intellectual interests, I am more interested in certain modalities than others. But that's also my personal preference. Not everybody is like me. I want to give space to the medical model. I think the medical model has its merits, and there's a lot of research that has been advanced, and there's a lot of promising results. There's a lot of trauma, and there's a lot of lack of trust in Western medicine, and there can be promising results with the use of certain substances. And yet, I think that there are a lot of paradoxes at the same time, and we like to call the attention to those. We are not psychotherapists with clinical licenses giving substances to people that are afraid to have this license removed. We are critical thinkers, social scientists, and we are having a role to raise discussions around this. So I think, again, it's better to be also a little bit realistic, because we are all living under capitalism, post-industrial, contemporary challenges that are pervasive, and our psychedelics are not going to reverse capitalism altogether. Psychedelics are happening inside psychedelic. This world's dominated by capitalism and systemic racism and all those other kinds of legacies of colonization, etc. We have to be kind of realistic and pragmatic, I think, in what we can achieve. So at the Chacruna Institute, we have been inviting these new startups and these new companies to widen their understanding and their perspective around cultural sensitivity, cultural awareness, around the roots of the psychedelic movement, helping to rewrite the narratives that this field tells itself, and helping to reinscribe the role of minorities in this narrative, and elevating the voice of indigenous people, of black folks and people of color in general, of queer people, of women, of people from the global south, and reinscribing their own role in this wider narratives. We also have been inviting people to uh, create ways of giving back. And so we have created this program, the Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative of the Americas, that supports 17 groups around 7 countries with small grants. We have raised about $200,000 so far for this program, and we have given small grants for these groups, which is not a lot, but it does help. And we have helped, plant seeds and create things. Inside this in this context. So we offer to these companies an invitation to participate and join. And we also have been suggesting that people create businesses that incorporate in BEB, more a psychedelic ethos. What would that look like, to have a company that works with psychedelics but has psychedelic values? So, are you offering psychedelics to your team and your staff as a part of their job? I think that would be important. Optionally, of course, because it's not for everybody. But are you trying to be creative? Are you trying to create networks that are horizontal and collaborative inside your company, or is it a big company with a huge hierarchy with, five VPs that make three times the rest of the team? How does that relate to your psychedelic experience of all being connected and all being part of a same kind of larger organic web of life? So I'm extremely interested in the intersection between business and social justice, and how to create companies that have values that are more aligned with the psychedelic movement. And we are trying to walk the talk inside our own organization, really giving priority to um, developing the person as a whole, and to creating a team spirit, and also, why not, to have a lot of fun. We have also traveled a lot, and we like to travel and to have experiences down on the ground. In Chacruna, we have a program that supports people to learn other languages, which I consider extremely important. So I am interested in seeing how these billionaire startups, what are they doing with all that money? Are they creating companies that, what kind of values are there that those companies? It's inside out. It's what are you doing for the field, but how are you creating your company as well? That is part of the discussion. Anyway, I realize that I get off topic, so sorry about that. I get carried away in my train of thoughts. I don't want to criticize entirely, the companies that work with molecules, because that's a reality. Uh, as I say, I think there's more sophisticated notions of healing in other contexts, and it depends on the molecule. Again, I don't think anybody will do anything with masculine without getting a lot of um, backlash. So it depends again which substance. We also published recently a declaration by the Mazatec in Mexico about attempts of drug reform, um, that have not really consulted Mazatec people. So we are encouraging all these companies to try to create relationships. And in terms of the non psychedelic effect, I am so disconnected to that. I don't even know what to say.
I think that says it all. And I like when you go off on these tangents. You're taking us on a journey. How appropriate. And I wasn't expecting you to have such a nuanced understanding reply. So, recognizing the that there is this plurality, and being open, is very refreshing. In I have a couple more questions for you as we approach the top of the hour. I'm aware that the intersection of religion and psychedelics, it's quite a fascinating aspect of your work. Can you please delve into how different religious traditions view and incorporate psychedelic experience as sacraments, and any commonalities that you've observed?
Well, I think I've touched a little bit on this. I have my research has focused a lot on ceremonial uses, traditional uses of plant medicines, shamanism, ritual religion. One, one, one of a few topics that I mentioned are some of these commonalities, more holistic notions of healing, the idea that the plant has spirits and you have a certain agency, and the power of ritual altogether. This idea that the ritual has it's not a symbolic thing, it's a real thing. It really enacts a certain reality and makes it, uh, by doing it, it has a consequence, it has an action, it has a result, that things are not so symbolic in this way. It's literal. You are a lot of times, like when it comes to indigenous shamanism, reenacting the stories of the myths of origin that narrate how humankind has come to earth, and how man is, how we are as humanity, why, how we came to be and why we're here, is a lot of times related to stories that involve tobacco, coca, ayahuasca, and doing the ritual is a time that you go again to this sphere and relive all of this, and you are literally in contact with this, the ancestors, and this order of factors that influence the whole creation of the universe and of man and of humanity. So this, in general, a lot of these traditions, sacred plants play a really important role uh, in the spine of culture, so to speak. So it's not like being counterculture or alternative or rebellious or trying to do something unconventional like it is from a countercultural perspective, but it's a lot about, through sacred plants, through medicine, through ceremony, you transmit values, you teach knowledge, you teach the younger generations, you socialize, you celebrate, you open yourself to creativity, and there is a relationship to arts because they also express all of these stories and all of these traditions. There is this interconnectivity between all these dimensions of life, between medicine and therapy and sacred and religion. So it's a kind of reorganization of categories that happen in a different way than we have, more compartmentalized different spheres. This is the sacred, this is the profane, this is the therapy, this is the fun. Traditionally, these things are more intermingled, and there's different categories and different ways of dialoguing between these categories. And so this is really what is fascinating. If you really delve into indigenous shamanism with plant medicines, you start to learn complete other relationships about things. And so I was just actually coming back from a retreat in Brazil where we had an elder teaching us a lot of those things. And I always remember this uh, anthropology professor that used to say, if you want to have true fiction, go listen to indigenous myths, because these myths that we have, like Star Wars or tales or cartoons, or it's often like a queen and a king and a dragon, or a kingdom. Like the motives are kind of similar and sort of limited. When it comes to indigenous stories, it's a fish that transformed into a person that created the moon, that it's just a whole other level of stories. It's different ontologies, different worldviews that we're just literally scrapping the outside when we try to understand. Shamans frequently say they were taught by, for example, a shaman that became a tiger, or started to live under the river, or was a being that lived inside the forest. It's not a human. And so it's there's a lot of things that are mysteries and hard to understand with our rational Western minds. um, and I think it's humbling. And to me, it has always been a process, hand in hand, learning to participate in ceremony and learning about those traditions. It's an authority, a psychological authority, going to another realm of your own understanding. It's a cultural authority, understanding other values, other worldviews. Uh, it's it's a less cognicentric, rational understanding of reality, and it's about opening up other avenues of understanding, about enchantment, about music, about symbol, about history, about land. Um, it's hard to reduce to like what are the commonalities, but I hope that's okay as an answer for you.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. You did mention music and musicality, and I would be remiss before I pose my last question to serve you with this penultimate question, and that is if you could impress upon us the importance of music and the potential for sound to be not only healing in and of itself, but to really represent an important accompaniment to the ceremonial context of psychedelic use.
I mean, I think you said it all on your own question. You already mentioned how central this is for the ritual, and it's a commonality on all, almost all that I know traditions. Music has a central role. We published a little article called open a little book called Opening the Portals of Heaven, the Brazilian ayahuasca music. So I have that resource also recommending to people that might be interested. We talk a lot about different traditions and um, different music, but we're, a lot is about music in the Santo Daime and in the UDV in Brazil, but also talk a little bit about icaros and shamanism and ayahuasca music in native contexts. Uh, and I think this is also a commonality with other psychedelics, not plant medicines. People often resort to music, and there's a whole knowledge around playlists and ways to conduct this rituals. It's also one of those topics that everybody's got an opinion and everybody's got a theory about. And it unites people, it has a kind of cross cultural element that people are able to relate to music in different ways and have opinions about musical choices. So there's a lot of angles. I want to take this minute to invite everybody to come to Chacruna Psychedelic Culture Conference that we are going to do in San Francisco. It's an annual conference in the Bay Area that we do every year. It's going to be 27 and 28 of April, and we're putting a lot of effort into organizing. It's a big effort from a small team, maybe 13 people working almost for a year to put this together, so it means a lot. I also want to invite everybody to join our membership program, where you can support the Chacruna Institute and our main programs, the Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative of the Americas, Psychedelic Justice, which is discussions around race and gender in psychedelics, and our other program, the protection of sacred plants and cultural traditions, and all this work around psychedelic churches. We also have 7 courses this year that we're doing, and we have a weekly newsletter that we put out. We also have free content with publications that we're delivering all the time. We have a few workshops. Um, and we're trying to help gear this movement on ways that are healthy and ethical and integral. There's a lot of people wanting to make a book. There's a lot of new experts. There's a rush of self-appointed LinkedIn experts, a lot of integration coaches, a lot of experts on this and that, and people that took substances 1 or 2 times in our leading circles, and also just a lot of people investing in psychedelics, hoping to make money without understanding that psychedelics are complex, don't work always, might have negative effects in some cases, and it are not for everybody. And so there's a lot of promise, but also a lot of businesses opening up and closing all the time. There's a lot of lack of money and funding, and uh, it's a kind of crazy rush, out there towards whatever people think is the psychedelic future. We have been doing this work for over 3 decades, and we were doing before it was trendy, and we plan on continuing doing it beyond it being trendy. And even if it's very hard to get funding and to um, have stability, we plan to continue talking about ethical issues, about integrity, raising awareness around delicate issues such as commodification and sexual abuse and exploitation of plant medicines and traditions and tokenization and legacies of colonization. So, all of this cultural knowledge, all of this educational content is very much in need of your support. And I would be very appreciative. We're also always looking for potential donors and potential supporters. Please donate. We are entirely self funded. We are very grassroots. I'm a recent immigrant from Brazil here, 6 years in the US, and the majority of our team is Mexicans and Brazilians, and we very much need help and support.
Wow. Well, clearly you are tapped in because, in a way, you answered my last question. And it is essentially to ask you to look ahead and describe what the aspirations and goals are for the Chacruna Institute for this year and beyond. You've provided a lot of really high quality resources to our listeners. And so, with that, I would like to extend gratitude to you, Dr. Bia Labate, for your time today, your expertise, and your passion. And I welcome you to share any closing remarks and final thoughts as we close out the session.
Thank you. I guess it's lunchtime, so I kind of was wrapping up, but it's great to talk to you. And yeah, I just want to encourage. I think there's a lot of opportunity in this field. It's much easier to get into the field of psychedelics now than it was when I started, when I was in the early '90s. Um, it was a total different scenario. So I think you guys got it easy now, especially the new young Gen Z and millennials compared to us. And of course, there's a whole generation above of me that was even harder. Um, so I think it's to not take for granted the privilege that we are in living much more liberal times and much more awareness than we had before. We have decriminalization, we have advanced of clinical trials, especially MDMA and psilocybin, and there's a lot of promise, there's a lot of horizons. So it's a good time to join this movement. We need a lot of help. We need new blood. We need new people. We need all the help we can get, and I think it's an honor to be able to join this movement. I don't like to think of a psychedelic industry, but of a psychedelic movement, and we are really really in need of good people and people that are also grounded. There's a lot of enthusiasm. Sometimes people get carried away and think they're going to abandon everything because they have an ayahuasca vision telling them to grow potatoes or whatever. We need people that are grounded and are committed to creating this movement in sustainable ways. So we also need professionals and not just people that want to love the plants, but people with specific expertise and ways to contribute is very important and very needed. And again, we also need a lot of financial support, and it's important for people to step up, especially those in positions of more power and privilege, to really support the people that are already in the ground doing the work and try to meet them where they're at and not try to reinvent the wheel or create new projects that are just um, you know their own views, trying to start from zero and reinvent the wheel all the time is not what we need. And I think we need a lot of courageous people that want to make sacrifices and people that want to take risks, because it's still, there is some taboo, there is stigma, there is lack of understanding, there's a lot of barriers, there's a lot of the fact that psychedelics continue to be illegal federally, even if in states like Oregon or Colorado you have certain rights, creates a huge paradoxes. For example, I want to protest here the platform, the bank Wise, who closed Chacruna's account 2 times because they said that we promote the therapeutic potentials of psychedelics and the legalization of cannabis, which is true. And proud of that. After we combated them, we appealed. They opened it up, then we appealed it, then they closed it again. We've appealed it again, and they closed it again. Years later, I wanted to open a personal bank account of mine with them, and they rejected me, which I consider real absurd. So there's still a lot of paradoxes and injustice things, unfair things, because it's still a very new era. A lot of problems relating to banking, insurance, taxes, and things like that. So there's a lot of holes. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. But I encourage everybody to join Chacruna's mission on indigenous reciprocity, psychedelic justice, and protection of sacred plants and cultural traditions, and be a part of this movement. Sending everybody much love and big hug.
Excellent. Much love and big hugs back to you. If you want to learn more, you can check out the website at chacruna.net. Dr. Labate, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm hopeful that one day our paths cross in real life. And until then, wishing you all the best. Keep up the great work, and thank you again.
Thank you so much.